On the evening of January 30th, 2026, Buckingham Palace shattered decades of silence with a statement that was brief, deliberate, and nothing short of explosive. Lady Louise Windsor, the 22-year-old granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, had officially inherited a secret Scottish estate that had remained hidden from public knowledge for over 70 years. The Grey House, a name whispered only in the most exclusive palace circles, was more than a property. It was a sanctuary, a private stronghold of memories, and a vault of historical treasures. Even senior royals had rarely set foot inside its walls, and now this hidden domain would pass into the hands of the youngest Wessex granddaughter. Before we begin today's royal update, I want to take a quick moment. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet, and you don't want to miss the latest developments and fascinating stories from the world of royalty. Subscribing is completely free and keeps you up to date as everything unfolds. And while you're here, let us know where are you watching from. Share it in the comments. It's wonderful to see viewers joining us from around the world. The announcement ignited immediate controversy. For weeks prior, Queen Camilla and members of the Parker Bowles family had quietly mobilized surveyors, lawyers, and advisors to claim the estate for themselves. They lost, completely. Behind the palace walls, private negotiations and legal consultations had failed to shift the Queen's intention. Lady Louise, largely invisible to the public eye, suddenly emerged as the key figure in a story of inheritance, loyalty, and power. What made the Grey House exceptional was not its architecture or its remoteness. It was its purpose. Nestled on over 200 acres of rugged Scottish highlands, between historic hunting corridors favored by Queen Victoria, the estate was deliberately isolated. Purchased in 1952, shortly after Elizabeth ascended the throne, it had been acquired through a private holding company, a structure designed to obscure its connection to the crown. The Queen retreated here for days at a time, handling only urgent matters while leaving aside the demands of public life. Complete solitude, uninterrupted reflection, and total privacy defined this space, a personal kingdom within the monarchy. Prince Philip rarely visited. He considered it too cold, too remote. Princess Anne spent occasional weekends hunting nearby but maintained distance otherwise. King Charles, according to multiple sources, never stepped foot on the estate. That detail would later prove crucial. When Camilla attempted to assert control, Charles's lack of personal attachment made him a powerless advocate. Unlike Elizabeth, no emotional ties bound him to the land, and no authority allowed him to redirect it. Inside the Grey House lay the real treasure. Personal diaries, correspondence with global leaders, photographic negatives, and audio recordings, some intended for future generations, had been safeguarded here. These materials were deliberately excluded from the royal archives and protected under a private deed, ensuring that the monarch or parliament could never claim them. They were Elizabeth's unfiltered thoughts, the voice of the Queen beyond the ceremonial, beyond the public gaze. Lady Louise now held custody of these secrets, a responsibility no museum or institution could ever assume. Her path to inheritance was rooted in a rare and intimate connection with the late Queen. During the summers of 2019 through 2021, Louise spent long stretches at Balmoral, walking the grounds, reading in private libraries, and assisting with personal papers that never reached official archives. Palace staff noticed that she didn't perform for attention. She simply existed alongside the Queen with quiet intelligence, grace, and curiosity. Elizabeth recognized echoes of her sister Princess Margaret in Louise. The same intellect, the same subtle humor, the same love of history and animals, but without drama, without spectacle. In October 2021, shortly after Prince Philip's funeral, the Queen executed a conditional personal legacy deed. Unlike her main will, this document was highly specific. It transferred the Grey House to Louise alone, bypassing her father, Prince Edward, and explicitly excluding Camilla and her descendants. The deed stipulated the property would never be subject to crown or parliamentary oversight and could be accessed only by the named beneficiary. Only 4 people knew of its existence: Princess Anne, the late Queen's personal solicitor, Prince Edward, and a trusted archivist. Camilla's attempts to gain influence began in October 2024. She discreetly inquired about withheld assets, sought to align the estate under her stewardship, and even deployed surveyors under the guise of environmental assessments. But the palace's response was subtle yet firm. King Charles stalled meetings, consulted legal advisors, and maintained a soft but unyielding line. The Grey House could not be reassigned. He referenced no family member and offered no personal justification, leaving Camilla in a position of quiet frustration and rising suspicion. By January 2026, the deed was finalized. Lady Louise Windsor became the sole owner of the Grey House, including all land, buildings, archival holdings, and staff contracts. The estate bypassed her father and crown administrators, flowing directly to Louise as an act of trust, affection, and deliberate empowerment. Within palace circles, the decision was acknowledged as classic Elizabeth, protective, deliberate, and unafraid to make choices others might find uncomfortable. For Camilla and her family, the announcement landed like an earthquake: shock, disbelief, and eventually anger. Far from unprepared, Lady Louise had already been training for this responsibility in secret. From mid-2025, she visited the estate under the guise of university research, accompanied only by discreet security and trained by former archivists and legal advisors. She studied archival management, estate operations, and legal succession. She understood the significance of this inheritance. It was not merely property. It was stewardship over history, legacy, and the moral authority of the late Queen herself. While Lady Louise's inheritance had been quietly finalized, the weeks leading up to the public announcement were marked by tension, maneuvering, and subtle battles behind palace walls. Camilla, aware that the Grey House was deliberately excluded from her influence, began what insiders described as a coordinated campaign to assert control. In late 2024, she discreetly asked advisors whether any royal properties had been withheld from official estate declarations. The question was framed as curiosity, but sources confirmed the intent was clear. She wanted the Grey House within her reach. Camilla understood the strategic value of the estate. Proximity to Balmoral meant symbolic power, access to historically significant archives, and the ability to attach her family name to one of Elizabeth's most personal spaces. By early January 2026, she escalated her efforts. During a private audience at Burke Hall, she formally proposed bringing the Grey House under joint stewardship, presenting restoration plans, heritage programs, and literary retreats as justification. On the surface, her pitch appeared to focus on conservation and culture. Behind the scenes, it was an attempt to secure legacy and influence over royal memory. Surveyors and consultants were quietly dispatched to the region weeks before the formal proposal. Under the guise of environmental assessment, architectural budgets were drawn, and boutique heritage programs were planned. Palace insiders recognized the pattern immediately. This was not a casual suggestion. It was a full-scale campaign to claim the property, and with it, narrative control over a historically sensitive royal asset. King Charles did not reject the proposal outright. Instead, he delayed meetings, sought legal advice, and instructed the Royal Estate Council to review ownership records dating back to the 1950s. The strategy was deliberate: avoid confrontation while the legal and procedural groundwork ensured the Queen's deed remained unchallenged. Camilla reportedly became increasingly frustrated. Internal communications show she expected some sympathy from Charles, believing that her role as Queen Consort gave her leverage. Instead, she was met with quiet resistance. During a closed session in January, Charles delivered a firm, unambiguous line: the estate could not be reassigned. Not now, not ever. He made no mention of Lady Louise's name, instead framing the refusal as a matter of pre-existing private settlement beyond the Crown's authority. Courtiers later noted the subtlety of his delivery: polite, measured, yet immovable. Meanwhile, Lady Louise had been preparing in secret for nearly a year. Starting mid-2025, she began discreet visits to the Grey House, traveling under the guise of a university research project. Locals in Glenmore Village confirmed her presence. She arrived in plain clothing, accompanied only by a female protection officer, and stayed up to 5 days at a time. Behind closed doors, she was trained by 2 former royal archivists and a legal advisor in managing estate records, cataloging sensitive historical materials, and understanding the legal mechanisms of private property succession. Her preparation went beyond practical skills. Mentally and emotionally, she was being groomed to assume responsibility for the Grey House as a sanctuary and repository of history. Retired palace staff noted that Louise treated her training with extraordinary seriousness. She understood that inheriting the estate was not a privilege but a duty, a responsibility to preserve Queen Elizabeth's legacy, protect historical materials, and navigate the complex web of palace politics with discretion. Camilla's campaign reached a critical juncture in late November 2025. Sources reveal that she attempted to call in a favor from Prince Edward, requesting that he delay the public filing of the inheritance to allow her more time to negotiate. Edward refused. His response, brief but resolute, was reported in internal memos. "My daughter will not be a placeholder for your ambitions. You had your turn." With that, any remaining obstacle to the deed's activation was removed. The legal transfer of the Grey House to Louise proceeded without delay. Once finalized, the deed confirmed Louise's sole ownership, including all buildings, land, staff contracts, and archival materials. Camilla and her descendants were explicitly excluded from access. For the Parker Bowles family, the loss was catastrophic. Months of planning, legal research, and attempted influence evaporated overnight. Courtiers described the atmosphere as one of shock, disbelief, and finally, anger. Camilla reportedly experienced a rare sense of vulnerability, realizing that her institutional position could not override the late Queen's carefully orchestrated plan. In the palace, Louise's allies played a critical role. Princess Anne ensured the Grey House staff remained under private payroll rather than the Crown estate. Duchess Sophie, Louise's mother, blocked any potential media leaks and prepared for surveillance attempts on the property. Local security teams confirmed that Camilla had tried to deploy drones and trail cameras to monitor the estate, all of which were neutralized. Together, these measures ensured that Louise inherited not only property but operational control and full discretion over the Grey House. By the time the public statement was issued in late January 2026, Lady Louise was already poised to assume her role as the estate's custodian. There was no grand announcement, no public event, no ceremonial handover. The legal update on the land registry quietly confirmed what had been achieved. For the palace and the public, the significance was unmistakable. The Grey House had passed into the hands of a young woman whose understanding of duty, legacy, and discretion had already been proven in secret. The moment Buckingham Palace confirmed Lady Louise's inheritance, the quiet corridors of royal power erupted into controlled chaos. Headlines splashed across tabloids and international media. Louise inherits Queen's secret estate. Grey House becomes the young guardian's domain. Camilla outmaneuvered by 22-year-old granddaughter. Public fascination turned instantaneous, and Louise, long accustomed to privacy, suddenly found herself at the center of a storm she had meticulously prepared for behind the scenes. Inside the palace, tensions were palpable. Camilla, still reeling from the announcement, attempted damage control. Her aides reported that she convened private strategy sessions, drafting plans to reassert influence over the narrative. The Parker Bowles family's frustration was almost physical. Months of planning, surveys, and legal maneuvering had been rendered irrelevant. In their eyes, the estate, its archives, and the symbolic control over royal memory had slipped away without their intervention. Camilla, however, faced an added complication: King Charles's subtle but firm signaling of support for Louise. His refusal to publicly reference Camilla's ambitions was interpreted by courtiers as a quiet endorsement of the late Queen's decision. At the heart of the public reaction was curiosity and admiration for Louise herself. Social media accounts, long dormant in her name, began trending with hashtags like Grey House Guardian, Silent Duty, and Louise Legacy. Analysts noted an unusual pattern. The majority of posts did not question her age or experience. Instead, they celebrated her discretion, intelligence, and commitment to responsibility. It became clear that the public was responding not just to the inheritance, but to the manner in which Louise had assumed stewardship, quietly, deliberately, and without spectacle. Amid the media frenzy, palace communications teams worked overtime to manage perceptions. Princess Anne, acting as Louise's principal ally, issued a carefully worded statement. Lady Louise speaks not as a future monarch, but as a custodian of legacy. Her voice is her own, and her duty is to history, not performance. The phrasing was precise, ensuring that the public narrative centered on responsibility rather than ambition. Sophie, Louise's mother, simultaneously coordinated private briefings to ensure that Camilla's attempts to influence media coverage were neutralized. Together, these efforts created a buffer between Louise and the storm of scrutiny, preserving her autonomy. Despite these measures, the palace could not entirely contain the fallout. Sources confirmed that Camilla attempted to challenge the inheritance informally, seeking private meetings with senior royal advisors to assert her claims. King Charles's response was unambiguous. The will was ironclad, and any contestation would be viewed as a breach of protocol. Camilla reportedly expressed frustration and disbelief, perceiving the refusal as a personal affront. Courtiers described her demeanor as visibly shaken, yet composed, a combination of anger, disappointment, and strategic recalibration. The estate itself became a symbol of the power struggle. Journalists speculated endlessly about the Grey House's archives, the personal letters, diaries, and recordings of Queen Elizabeth II. Historians began piecing together the potential significance of materials now exclusively under Louise's control. Legal experts emphasized that, under the Crown Archives Act, the property and its contents were outside official oversight. Whatever Louise chose to preserve or reveal would remain entirely her decision. This realization added weight to her position, both within the monarchy and in public perception. Louise's response, however, was measured. She did not issue statements immediately. Instead, she focused on the estate, overseeing staff, cataloging materials, and familiarizing herself with the archives. Her discipline contrasted sharply with Camilla's reactive media efforts, reinforcing the narrative of responsibility over spectacle. Observers noted that Louise's calm approach intensified the pressure on Camilla, who struggled to shift public attention back to her own initiatives. The first public indication of Louise's influence came during a quiet appearance at Glenmore Village, where she participated in a charity event. Rather than center the press, she acknowledged the community and the estate itself, emphasizing stewardship and preservation over personal gain. Her remarks were later shared widely online, often juxtaposed with Camilla's public statements, which were criticized for being performative or self-promotional. By the end of the first week following the inheritance announcement, the palace had effectively entered a new dynamic. Louise's position as the custodian of Grey House was secure, yet the political and symbolic ramifications were still unfolding. Camilla's efforts to assert control had been contained, but internal rivalries and public scrutiny remained high. Courtiers described a tense equilibrium. Louise respected the institution, but operated with a personal autonomy that few could contest, while Camilla navigated a constrained space of diminishing influence. Even within the royal household, the subtle reshuffling of alliances became evident. King Charles quietly endorsed Louise's independence through private meetings, and Princess Anne continued to reinforce her role as custodian. Sophie ensured operational security and protected Louise from intrusions. Meanwhile, Camilla, aware of her limited leverage, began recalibrating her approach, focusing on charitable initiatives and symbolic displays of service rather than property or legacy. In essence, the first week post-announcement established a clear pattern. Louise, through quiet preparation, legal clarity, and disciplined action, had assumed both symbolic and practical control over a key piece of royal history. Camilla, despite ambition and prior planning, had been outmaneuvered not by spectacle, but by foresight, preparation, and loyalty to principle. The palace and public alike were witnessing a rare phenomenon: a young royal exercising authority without entitlement, reshaping the narrative through presence, preparation, and quiet competence. By mid-February 2026, the Grey House inheritance had become the epicenter of a royal maelstrom. International media outlets were relentless, publishing analyses, historical retrospectives, and speculative op-eds. Headlines ranged from the young guardian of Elizabeth's legacy to Camilla outmaneuvered, the rise of Lady Louise. Every detail, from estate security protocols to Louise's wardrobe choices at public appearances, was scrutinized. Courtiers described the palace atmosphere as frenetic calm, a rare blend of internal tension and carefully managed external image. Queen Camilla, still reeling from her defeat, attempted a series of high-profile initiatives designed to reclaim narrative authority. She launched the Crown's Compassion, a public exhibition highlighting her charitable work and emphasizing service to the monarchy. Yet the timing, coinciding with Louise's emerging initiatives at the Grey House, backfired. Social media and traditional media alike contrasted Camilla's polished presentation with Louise's authenticity, discretion, and evident knowledge of the estate's history. The comparison consistently favored Louise. Analysts noted that public perception was shifting from admiration for the Queen Consort's visibility to respect for Louise's silent stewardship. Inside the palace, internal conflicts intensified. Camilla reportedly requested private meetings with King Charles and senior advisors to reconsider the inheritance structure. Legal memos and historical documents were consulted, but the will was unassailable. King Charles, adhering to both the law and his mother's explicit wishes, refused to intervene. Courtiers noted that Camilla's frustration was compounded by the visible support Louise had garnered from Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and even Sophie. Strategic alliances, carefully cultivated over decades, had solidified around the youngest Windsor capable of carrying forward Elizabeth II's private legacy. Louise, for her part, continued to operate quietly yet decisively. The Grey House Initiative, a living archive and trust for ethical leadership, launched in February 2026 and streamed globally. In her first public address, she emphasized preservation over performance. This estate is not a trophy nor a stage for personal ambition. It exists to protect what cannot be inherited: values, memory, and duty. The speech went viral, receiving over 9 million views within hours. Public response was overwhelmingly positive, framing Louise not as a minor royal thrust into attention, but as a moral compass for the monarchy itself. The media storm reached a crescendo when Princess Catherine shared images of Louise cataloging the Grey House archives alongside Princess Anne. The caption, "Work not display, duty not decoration," was widely circulated, further reinforcing the narrative of authenticity and service. Analysts noted that Catherine's post was a subtle yet powerful endorsement that amplified Louise's emerging moral authority. The contrast between Camilla's exhibition and Louise's quiet labor created an unavoidable public narrative: influence through action, not visibility. Within the palace walls, the tension verged on institutional strain. Camilla's aides described an emotional paralysis in attempts to redirect attention. Meetings with advisors often ended without resolution, as the legal and moral authority surrounding Louise was unassailable. Reports of private confrontations surfaced. A February 26th encounter in Windsor Castle's Long Gallery, described by witnesses as intense yet decorous, involved Camilla challenging Princess Anne about Louise's prominence. Anne's measured response, "The public sees what we protect, not what we perform," epitomized the new paradigm. The monarchy could not control authenticity when it emerged from quiet service. The Grey House itself became both a physical and symbolic fortress. Cybersecurity experts confirmed multiple failed attempts at surveillance, including drones and unauthorized monitoring of estate boundaries. Louise's meticulous preparations, supported by Sophie and Edward, ensured operational security while also demonstrating strategic competence. Every step reinforced her authority over what had been intentionally designed as the Queen's private sanctuary, underscoring the depth of planning behind her sudden visibility. By early March, the palace had reached equilibrium. Camilla's public initiatives continued, but they no longer dictated the narrative. King Charles maintained formal neutrality, while Princess Anne and Edward acted as guardians of both Louise and the Grey House's archives. Louise herself remained grounded, declining elevation to HR status, choosing instead to operate under her existing title while exercising unprecedented moral and symbolic influence. Public admiration framed her as the true inheritor of Elizabeth II's ethical legacy, a young royal capable of commanding respect without spectacle. In the months that followed, the monarchy quietly adapted to this new reality. Media coverage shifted focus from contested inheritance to the substance of Louise's work: conservation, archival preservation, and leadership training. Public opinion solidified around her role as custodian, with polls indicating overwhelming support for her autonomy and influence. The Grey House became a symbol not just of private heritage, but of principled authority exercised without entitlement. The story's conclusion was as subtle as it was profound. Lady Louise Windsor, at 22, had inherited more than an estate. She inherited responsibility, historical memory, and a moral compass for the monarchy. Queen Camilla, despite her visibility and effort, had been outmaneuvered not by spectacle, but by foresight, loyalty, and deliberate preparation. The palace had weathered a media storm, internal tension, and potential institutional fracture, emerging with a new narrative. One in which quiet integrity, disciplined preparation, and moral authority held greater weight than power through visibility or position. Ultimately, the Grey House stood not as a trophy, but as a testament to Elizabeth II's final lesson. Legacy is earned through service, guarded with discretion, and entrusted to those capable of preserving it beyond ambition or performance. Lady Louise Windsor had absorbed that lesson, internalized it, and ensured that the monarchy would never forget it. In the quiet Scottish Highlands, the youngest guardian of the crown's memory had assumed her place. Unheralded yet indelibly powerful, the last word spoken not by spectacle, but by duty fulfilled.